hello, and we are doing a special episode here of Cinematary. As most of you guys know, we are headed to the Toronto International Film Festival this year. Myself, Lydia, and Andrew. Andrew is here with us, but also Darren Hughes, who, big friend of the podcast, has been on multiple times, has come on to talk about TIFF before. He is also going for, Darren, how many years is this now?
This will be number 15 in a row. Which doesn't seem possible.
Do you get like a special pin or something when you go? Like, do they have like a?
I'm not aware of. I'm not aware of a pin. I do get slightly better treatment now than I seemed to get 15 years ago, but that's it.
All right. Well, we'll that kind of scares me now for how we'll be treated, but that's a whole other thing. We can deal with that on our own. Yeah, let's. We're gonna just do a quick preview, talk about some of the movies that are playing at TIFF that we're excited for. I figure we can kind of just bounce around to each person, and Darren, since you're the veteran here, I'm gonna start with you. I guess we'll start with just your first one. What's one of your more anticipated titles playing there?
Oh, number one is definitely High Life, the new film by Claire Denis. I'm sure I've talked about her on the program before, but she's my favorite filmmaker, and so I'm always excited to see a new film by her, and especially this one, which I first started hearing rumors about 4 or 5 years ago, and I wasn't sure if it was ever going to get made or if we'd ever get to see it. So yeah, this is definitely number one on my list. I've heard a couple rumors recently that I won't say they've tempered my expectations, but they've kind of changed my expectations for the film. I think it even mentions in the TIFF program note that there's some shocking scenes in it, and it's actually made me think about. I think one of the under-discussed aspects of her work is her interest in violence and darkness. Even going back to I don't know if either of you have ever seen I Can't Sleep.
No.
It's one of my favorites of her films, and it's about serial killers. And then there's, of course, I know you all talked about Trouble Every Day, which is a shocking film in a lot of ways. And Bastards is just pitch black, that film. And so apparently there's some extreme scenes in High Life too. But yeah, I just her first English language film, her first gala premiere at TIFF, which is odd. So that's exciting.
The cast is strange and absurd and amazing. Juliette Binoche, Robert Pattinson, and Andre 3000.
Yeah.
What is going on with that cast? This is the one that I'm maybe the most sad that I don't get to see at TIFF.
Well, I don't know any details behind the production history, but I have to assume that one of the reasons it got made is because Robert Pattinson seems to be a really interesting cinephile. He helps get interesting films made, and so I'm sure his name lended a lot of potential to financiers.
Zach interviewed him and asked him what his secret film Twitter handle was, and he didn't respond, right?
No, he just laughed and walked away.
He's out there.
Yeah, I know. He was just like, oh no, I'm found out. I'm curious to see this. It's funny, we were talking about before. I'm probably the lowest person on the totem pole to be going to see High Life, just because I'm not as familiar with Claire Denis as most other people on the Cinematary panel. But I'm gonna be seeing this on I think on Tuesday during the press screenings. So, but at the same time, I am excited to kind of see this. I think that there is something really provocative and I guess otherworldly about this. I'm not familiar with her other work, but this seems to be kind of outside the realm of what you're used to seeing with her. I guess, is that a fair assessment? In terms of the sci-fi, I guess.
I mean, it's in space, yeah.
Well, there's that, but then also it's had like a weird history. It began as a collaboration with Zadie Smith and I forgot her husband's name. And I know that Zadie Smith is no longer attached to the project and hasn't been for quite some time. And I don't know if he will have a credit on the film either. So I'm just curious to see the shape the film ended up taking. She ended up writing the script with Jean-Paul Forgot, who's her longtime collaborator. And it's also being shot by a different DP. She's not working with Agnes Godard on this. So I'm just curious to see what her world looks like when it's filmed by somebody else.
Andrew, what about you?
Well, there's a lot of things that I would love to see that I'm not getting the chance to see. For example, High Life, because I'll only be in TIFF for 4 days, and it's a 2-week festival. I'm starting to get the sense, after attending festivals for about 2 years now, I guess, that this is going to be a recurring thing of like always being sad about the things I don't get to see because of, you know, whatever limitations there are. But I don't get to see Zhang Yimou's Shadow. I'm a huge fan of him. I don't get to see the new Barry Jenkins movie. I don't get to see the new Jia Zhang Ke, Ashes Purest White. But of the things that I do get to see, the things that I'm probably most excited for are the new Halloween and the new Errol Morris film, American Dharma. Halloween, because, you know, I'm a big horror fan. Halloween was a big part of my video essay that I did this past summer about guns and horror movies, and it's just now sinking in for me that now that I get to go to festivals like TIFF, I do actually get to see world premieres of movies. Like, this is something that it took a long time to wrap my head around, but I will be in the first audience to ever see the new Halloween film, and that's kind of surreal. Me and Lydia are both going to see that at midnight on, I guess, Saturday. And Zach, you're going to try and make that as well, but you're not sure if it's going to work.
I feel like that if I miss that, that's fair, because I have a little bit more ability to go see those movies than you both have, since I have the press pass. So if you guys get to see that without me, I'll be bummed, but at the same time, I feel like we have two highly qualified people going to see the new Halloween, because like you just pointed out, but also Lydia, I think, has written about Halloween before. She's a big fan of just that first John Carpenter film. And that since this is going to be what seems like a direct follow-up to that 1978 film, I'm excited to hear what she has when she rolls back at 1:30 2 a.m. After you guys see it. So
yeah, as we talked about on the River of Grass episode, she self-identifies as a genre brat and is interested in seeing how the genre narrative gets interpolated here. And then the other thing that I said I was most excited for, American Dharma by Errol Morris. This is also not a world premiere, but a North American premiere. Errol Morris has made a couple films in this vein that he calls Interatron films. I think, Darren, you probably know more about this than I do, but essentially he has invented a style of camera work where it appears that the person he's interviewing is like looking directly into the camera. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how it works, but basically the person who's being interviewed is looking directly into the camera, but it looks as though he's looking straight at Errol Morris.
Yes.
And so it feels like you as the viewer are a participant in a conversation with this person.
And this one is of special interest because Errol Morris this time is interviewing Steve Bannon. And in the past, The Fog of War and The Unknown Known, he's interviewed McMahon and, who's the other?
Donald Rumsfeld.
Person? Donald Rumsfeld, yeah. So, equally like questionable, problematic, controversial figures in presidential politics. Steve Bannon is maybe even a bit more extreme in terms of like being a pretty obvious like white supremacist. And I'm interested to see how Errol Morris tackles this like really touchy territory, especially in the context of, people being concerned about giving platforms to people like Steve Bannon and Richard Spencer and actually hurting their own cause in terms of not criticizing them, but spreading their message. Errol Morris always does something interesting with how he frames these kinds of conversations. And I have no idea what to expect, but it's going to be something.
I'm looking forward to that one too. I love Fog of War. I've watched that film so many times. And what's interesting is after that, when Donald Rumsfeld and now Steve Bannon agreed to sit down in front of the Interatron, like you imagine the arrogance it requires to think that you're going to get away with it. That like you are I'm going to be smarter than Errol Morris. I'm not going to fall into any of his traps. And that's, I think that maybe is what I'm looking forward to most of all, is just kind of seeing the chess match between the two of them.
Absolutely. And if I could flag up one more last thing before I stop talking, I'm very excited
I was going to ask you real quickly about, because I know we're going to try to go see some of the wavelengths, and I know that Darren as well is going to be catching those. So I figured we could talk briefly about those, because me, you, and Lydia are going to go see the Earth, Wind, and Fire section of them, and they have some names that I know that you're already like shooting up in your seat for. So
right, yeah, there's a couple different shorts programs of avant-garde shorts under the title of Wavelengths, and the first one that we're all going to be attending together has a pretty stacked lineup. Darren knows a little bit more about the filmmakers than I do, but there's a lot of stuff in there that I'm already really hyped for. There's a new Jody Mack short that's playing, and there is a Pitchapong We're Ethical short, a name that gets thrown around a lot on Cemetery nowadays. His new short is called Blue. I don't know anything about it. I've never seen a short film by him before. I've only seen features, and I could not be more excited to watch that with the festival crowd.
I'm glad you guys are coming to that. Wavelengths, especially the shorts programs, is always, to me, the highlight of the festival. It's been my time going to Wavelengths overlaps almost exactly with Andrea Picard as the chief curator of the program. And she has shaped my taste more than anyone through her programming. So it's just been a constant education for me. And the other thing that's fun about these shorts programs, it's not quite the same now that they're being shown at the Lightbox Theater. But for years, they were always shown at Jackman Hall, which is attached to the Art Gallery of Ontario. And it's only 3 or 4 blocks from the main hub of the festival, but it was enough that it was almost like there was a Wavelengths clique, and we would all get together for a couple hours on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday at the start of the fest. And it was like a little reunion almost. So the advantage of having it now in the Lightbox is that there's amazing projection and there's a lot more seats. So the tickets aren't. I think it's great that within a like celebrity fueled festival like TIFF, for me every year the Wavelengths programs are some of the hardest tickets to get because there's such demand for it and there's so many filmmakers in town who want to go to. But I'm really glad you all are going to that. I'll just give a quick shout out to my friend Lina Rodriguez, who has a short film in that first program too, called Ante Mis Ojos. So that's going to be fun.
It's funny that you say that Wavelengths programmer has shaped your taste so much, because I feel like my taste has been shaped so much in recent years by the avant-garde stuff that's been programmed by Public Cinema, i.e. you. And so it's going to be interesting to kind of like go to the source and see like where you're getting all of these things you're programming in Knoxville.
Yeah, I mean, if all goes as planned, I'm sure some of these films playing in Toronto in Wavelengths this next couple weeks will find their way to Knoxville eventually.
Mm-hmm. I hope so. Zach, you're getting to see a lot more than I am, just because you're going to be in town more days than I will. So what are you most excited for?
I'll be the basic bitch part of the podcast since I hit a bunch of the more name, I guess you could say like name brandy things. I'm gonna try to go and see A Star Is Born, the Bradley Cooper directorial.
Are you looking forward to that?
I'm not really? Like I'm not really. I'm not sure what to make with that. It's at like 9:30 in the morning, and I'm like, oh great, I got to deal with Bradley. That's a whole other thing. But I'm gonna hopefully go and see If Beale Street Could Talk. I'm very excited to see that. I'm gonna get to see the new Mia Hansen love film Maya, which sounds very kind of breaking off what she's been doing lately. I thought Things That Come was such a massively powerful film, and this one, the synopsis is a French war correspondent released from captivity in Syria is unable to rebuild a normal life until he returns to his childhood home and meets a teenage girl who guides him forward. And I was like, that seems a lot heavier than Isabelle Huppert just breaking up with her husband and doing stuff in the French countryside, but whatever, we'll deal with that. I'm also going to see the new Olivier Assayas film, Nonfiction, which I've heard mixed stuff about so far. It's played a little bit beforehand since it's him dealing with technology and Twitter and Snapchat and stuff, which sounds like a weird combination. I don't know.
He kind of does it with Clouds of Sils Maria, but it seems like he's leaning even further into that with this movie.
And personal shopper, too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
as well. I am going to see the new Li Shangdong film, Burning. I'm excited about that one. I've heard really, really good stuff about that already. The one kind of... I'm really excited to see this, even though I don't feel like it's going to have as much of an impact as some of his other films. But I'm going to go see Hong Sang-soo's new film, Hotel by the River, and I'm really excited mainly to see it because it seems like whenever Hong Sang-soo movies come out, I'm seeing it like a year afterwards, because it's always playing like festivals. The release is always it's so LA, New York heavy. Something like Public Cinema will get it, but it doesn't necessarily play here in Savannah. And since I'm not in Knoxville, I usually miss them, so I feel like multiple years behind with those movies. So I'm really excited to see this and get to see like with a crowd. I'm just imagining that scene from Right Now Wrong Then, when Kim Min-hee is sitting in the auditorium at the festival that director, the director character in that film is at. And so I'm very excited to see that, just because I'll be like, I'll be on top of a Hong Sang-soo movie for the first time ever, even though this is probably one of like 8 movies that he comes out with in 2018.
Yeah, I was going to say, I showed one of his 2017 films in Knoxville. Yeah. So one of the 3. But they all did get U.S. releases. It's crazy. Cinema Guild has kind of gone all in with Hong Sang-soo. In fact, they've got the new film too. So they've already picked up the new film too. So hopefully get a little bit wider release.
I'm excited to be like in a crowd and getting to see it like in that kind of setting, because at the same time I've always watched them on like a DVD or a screener or whatever at home. So I think that I'm curious to see experiencing that on a large screen. I know Nathan has talked previously about seeing, I forgot if it was the day after Claire's Camera, where Hong was speaking in New York. But he talked about how that was a really incredible experience. So those are the ones that I'm kind of excited to see, even though they may be, as I said, a little bit in the basic bitch category. But that's just that'll only... I
don't know if I would define Hong Sang-soo as the basic bitch category.
Well, we'll wait until maybe I like Star is Born, and then we can reclassify it. I guess before we wrap up, Darren, I'm curious. You've been kind of giving us TIFF advice to this point. So any final words that you think that as these kind of newbies to the festival should look out for and kind of be expecting heading into this? I feel like this is kind of the granddaddy festival, at least in North America.
Yeah, I mean they've always prided themselves on their reputation as being the People's Festival. That was one of the defining missions from the start. And with each year, I think the ticket prices climb a bit, and it becomes a little bit less of that. There's more and more complaints about ticket prices and lines and those sorts of things. But I guess I think I've mentioned this to you guys in emails before, but the benefit of going to the sort of taking the public route and going through it is first of all, if the filmmakers and actors and actresses are in town, they usually show up for the public screenings, and it really is fun. I remember the very first time I went, seeing people like Tsai Ming-liang and Claire Denis in person for the first time was just like a thrill in itself. And getting them, like Andrew was saying, like no one has seen this film before, and here I am sitting in a room with the filmmaker, theoretically with the opportunity to ask them a question about it. It's a great experience. And also on the public side, if you find yourself in a line, it's like great people watching and great small talk, because you can just ask people if they've seen anything good, and everybody waiting in line with you is a cinephile and loves the festival. So great conversations. I guess you guys, it's changed in the past few years, just because of the way film conversation has changed online. So, if you're at all involved with the conversations in film Twitter, TIFF is like, I always say it's like film nerd summer camp, where like, everybody who you've seen on Twitter or you've seen their byline on the go-to film sites, they're there, and chances are you'll bump into them at some point. And so that's fun.
Do people want to be approached with, hey, I know you from Twitter? Or is it better to just keep your distance?
I would imagine that changes that varies from person to person. I mean, if you've had exchanges with them on Twitter, especially, feel free to introduce yourself and say hi.
I'm not going to lead with that though. Hey, you're from Twitter.
How did you guys have you had your sights set on this trip for a while?
I think since you came on to do our recap for TIFF 2017, we had the idea of like, hey, what if we did a cemetery trip up to Toronto? And then between then and now, we've covered a lot more festivals and gotten a lot more press credentials for festivals. So it felt like more feasible that we could just reach out and say, hey, we're this publication. We would like a press pass to this. And we didn't get as many press passes as we wanted to. We were only able to get one.
Which was still amazing.
That still felt like enough of an... Yeah, it's amazing for a publication of our size. So that felt like enough of an excuse to make sure that a bunch of us went down there. Or went up there, I should say.
The first time I went in 2004, it was very similar. I had sort of this side project of I was a contributing editor to an arts magazine in Canada, and so I was emailing every day with a group of 5 or 6 people. And at one point, one of them mentioned casually that she had an aunt and uncle who live in Mississauga, which is like on the southwest end of the subway line into Toronto. Her aunt and uncle were going to be out of town that week. So we had a place to stay, and it was kind of spur of the moment. It was like 5 or 6 of us flew to Toronto and met in person for the first time. And I had the same experience you did, where I kind of thought I would get to see every one of the great films in the program. And I ended up seeing, maybe I remember missing screenings because I just couldn't find theaters. And
oh man, I'm really hoping that doesn't happen, because it seems like Toronto is a confusing festival in terms of navigating it, since it's in like 5 different buildings across the city.
The only trick will be if you're going to Midnight Madison or Midnight Madness. That's
Midnight Madison.
I was thinking of the word Ryerson. So those screenings are up at the Ryerson Theater, which is a bit of a trek from the main theaters. But otherwise, it's actually gotten much more condensed over the past 7 or 8 years, and it's not hard at all to navigate.
Good. You may have to be our Sherpa. I'll have to reach out on Twitter, get directions advice.
Happy to. Plus, you've all got phones. You'll figure it out.
Well, our phones probably won't work in Canada, though, right? We should probably have them turned off. I haven't gotten the internet.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
We'll just be. We just talked about Meek's cutoff. We'll just treat it like that. We'll just trek up there. We'll have some guy with I have a beard, so I can be that person and just be like, it's over here.
That'll work.
All right. Well, I guess we'll count this as our first TIFF diary. We're going to be coming out with a couple more of these along the way. We're going to try to report every morning right after, the day after, to report in with what movies we saw. So, I'm excited. We'll be starting this on Thursday. It's crazy.